So about only 1% of audiophiles I have met know about the secret, and I'm going to tell you what that is in this video. And without beating around the bush, I'm going to tell you the secret right now. This is the secret. It's a single driver speaker. This is called the Closer Acoustics 4-lane loudspeaker. And yes, we're specifically looking at the 4-lane loudspeaker as an example in this video because they are a really good single driver design that really sets apart from other single drivers, as we'll talk about in this video. However, all single drivers do have something that a multi-driver design does not have. First, most single driver designs are crossover-less designs, meaning they do not have a crossover inside the cabinet. And if you don't know what a crossover is, very simply, when you have a multi-driver speaker with a tweeter, with a mid-woofer, or even maybe an extra woofer, a 3-way or 2.5-way loudspeaker that has a dedicated woofer for the bass, when you have those things, you have to make sure to have a crossover, which is a dividing network to make sure that individual drivers play a specific range of frequency. Imagine a tweeter playing a really low bass note. That's not gonna go well for the tweeter. It's not gonna sound good. It may actually even damage your tweeter. So you absolutely need a dividing network like the crossover. However, with a single driver, it does all of those frequencies from high frequency to the lowest of the frequencies. It does all of it by itself without a crossover. Okay, so what's the big deal with having no crossover? Well, the reason we use high quality crossover parts in high-end audio speakers I have reviewed on this channel is because usually when you use higher quality parts, it's a better signal path. It's using higher quality materials, higher conductance, this and that. So essentially what you're trying to do is make the crossover more kind of disappear. Well, in this case, there is no crossover, so there is no need to use high quality parts because technically less is more in this case. And truly so, when you don't have a crossover, that is the best crossover possible. And as some audiophiles will point out, it's like directly wiring your amplifier to the driver itself because again, there's nothing in between your amplifier and the speaker driver. This leads to a very subjective phenomenon that has been around in the audiophile world since the radio days, where audiophiles say it sounds pure. However, just being totally honest here, I have heard a lot of single driver designs. I have friends who really love single driver designs. They have own their own design and stuff. It's very interesting. I never really understood the pure aspect. Especially in 2023, there are speakers like the monoacoustic Platimon, for example, that do have a crossover, and I find them pure sounding. Or maybe the term I should use is transparency, right? I find them transparent, more see-through, right? Very clean sounding. And maybe the word pure that some audiophiles are using, including myself, is really an extreme version of the word transparency, right? When transparency is taken to the next level, maybe it's pure. Maybe that's how it is. But after hearing the OGY from Closer Acoustics, which I reviewed on this channel not that long ago, check that video out, and also listening to the 4-lane loudspeakers now, I think I finally understand what the word pure really means. And I'll have some sound demos in this video so that you can actually hopefully hear what I'm talking about when I say pure. But yeah, we're gonna talk about what that pure sound is in this video. Hopefully I'll be able to translate that to you guys so you guys kind of get what I'm talking about. And second benefit, or the biggest benefit with a single driver design, is that it's all coming from one spot. So all the high frequency to the low frequency is created by the single driver. So all the sound is coming from that one spot instead of a multi-driver design, which usually again has a tweeter or a mid-woofer and even a bigger woofer at the bottom maybe. Then you can see how it's all coming from a different point source or different spots, and you have to time align the drivers to make sure that the high frequency, the tweeter, isn't reaching your ears first, making the high frequency sound too bright. You have to make sure that all the frequencies are reaching your ears at the same time, and that's called time alignment. And this can be quite a bit of a daunting task to the designers. As well, you have to use crossovers to sometimes time align as well. So a lot of these phase issues, coherence issues, blending issues can arise. Now, you don't get that with a single driver now because, again, as simple as everything coming from that one point source, which is exactly what multi-drivers are trying to do by using a crossover. So Again, a single driver naturally has great imaging, great imagery, so that you can depict everything in the music very exact. So that's a big plus for a single driver or coaxial drivers as well. And our goal for us to say, while many speakers these days, even if they are multi-driver speakers, are very good at imaging, it just does not rival a single driver or even a coaxial driver for that matter. Really, single drivers have that inherent imagery. So if imagery is important to you, then a single driver is a definite try. You definitely must try. But moving on to the third benefit of a single driver is that, well, designers have to only worry about two things. So let me explain. Largely, when a designer design a speaker, they worry about three things, which is the driver, the cabinet, and the crossover. Well, in this case, as you already know, there is no crossover in the 4 lanes, which means that you have to only worry about the cabinet and the driver. Now, not always the case, but in case with the 4 lanes, that means that you get a very high quality driver. This specific driver was designed in France, handmade. It's a very boutique driver, and it is by EMS. And honestly speaking, it's probably one of the best single drivers I have heard, and I don't even really like single drivers. But yeah, usually you do get a good single driver, and usually they are a more meticulously designed than multi-drivers. Because again, when you're designing a tweeter, you have to only worry about how it performs in the high frequency and how it's gonna blend to the mid-woofer that designers will use. But when it comes to a single driver, it is a lot harder because now you have to tune the driver to behave by itself without the help of a crossover. And that can be a daunting task and requires expertise and a lot of time and dedication to get that driver to work really well. And not just the drivers, but going to the cabinet. Yeah, cabinet is a big factor in a single driver. I mean, you can put the same single driver inside another cabinet and it will sound totally different. And yes, that is typically what happens to a lot of speakers, but with single drivers, it's extremely important that a single driver is cooperating with the cabinet as well. And again, not always the case, but in case of the 4 lane, because it's a high-end brand and it's designed very well, one of the best single driver speakers I've heard, it is designed with careful attention to the cabinetry. This is actually a transmission line design, which means that it has this maze-like structure inside the cabinet, which requires a lot more calculation, again, dedication, time, experimentation, and a lot of failures to make sure that the drivers work well with this maze type of design. And in fact, this transmission line design, despite being difficult, it is the preferred method for a single driver like this because of one primary reason, and that is the bass. With bass, transmission line designs are known to roll off the lower frequency slowly so that you get more of that bass, as well as allowing the speakers to extend lower. So it's kind of like a double help with that bass region. And you can see that, companies like PMC and some others that use transmission line designs for this exact purpose. But when it comes to single drivers, this is kind of vital. And in my opinion, it's a really good design choice because when you use a single driver, usually we call it sometimes wideband driver as well, because it's not technically a full range driver, meaning no driver, as far as I know, really hits 20 hertz, right, to 20 kilohertz. That is an extreme range for any driver to take care of by itself. So usually it rolls off faster in the bass and faster in the high frequency, leaving you with most of the range, but kind of dropping off on the extremes. So what you kind of get out of that, subjectively speaking, is a lot less bass with the single drivers. So now you can see how a transmission line cabinet like this can really help with that. So a single driver in the 4 lanes actually provide a really nice bass response along with the transmission line cabinet. And I'm surprised that a single driver can create this bass. And I won't be surprised if most people listening to the speaker are kind of like, whoa, where is the bass coming from? It's kind of unbelievable that this single driver is creating that type of bass. But the trick is, it's not just the driver that's creating that bass, it's also the speaker cabinet. And as a bonus, because this is a high-end brand, you do get the cabinet made out of Baltic birch plywood, which is a much higher quality material than MDF or HDF that you will traditionally get with other speaker designs in the market. And this beautiful cabinet design is designed and manufactured in Poland. So again, the driver, the EMS driver, is handmade in France, and the cabinet is designed and manufactured in Poland. And once again, not always the case, but with this brand specifically, Closer Acoustics, they are using a very nice set of binding posts from WBT. So everything I'm seeing here is extremely high quality. I really like the speakers, and it really allows me to kind of understand what the single driver is about. I only decided to review the 4-lane loudspeakers because I was interested in hearing this specific single driver design after hearing the OGY, the small Closer Acoustic loudspeakers that I have reviewed on my channel, and was pleasantly surprised by. And again, like I said in that video, I really didn't expect much because personally for me, just speaking honestly, I am not a fan of single drivers. I really never got that magic. And in fact, coming back to that purity aspect, I really never thought of a single driver as pure sounding because they are pure sounding. And what I mean by that is, personally for me, I don't know about anyone else, but personally for me, when I listen to a single driver design, most speaker designs that are single driver designs sounded pure, not because it sounded pure, but because it drew itself more to the mid-range and high frequency because it didn't have much bass. And so when I added subwoofers to that system, usually with single drivers, I no longer felt that it was as pure as when I didn't have the subwoofer. But that all went away with the OGY. I fully expected the OGYs to fall apart and lose its purity once I added a subwoofer, but I didn't get that. I still got the purity that I was promised with the OGY. And so I was interested in trying something like the 4-lane that was a tower design, slim tower design, and seeing how that can improve in my system, maybe hopefully without even a subwoofer. However, I will say that I am pretty impressed with the bass response of the 4 lanes. For a single driver, I still don't think it competes with multi-driver speakers or big woofers like 15-inch woofers inside a speaker that removes a lot of air. I don't think it has the dynamics capable to do that, and that is kind of expected for a single driver. So I would still add a subwoofer if you are coming from a place of a multi-driver with big woofers and want to try a single driver out in your system. But if you're coming from a single driver or a panel design, for example, that doesn't have that much bass, then you'll be quite pleasantly surprised by the amount of bass and quality of bass you will get from the 4 lanes. And yes, I still find the 4 lanes to be pure because it's pure sounding rather than because it lacks bass. So what the heck does this pure mean? Remember how I said in the beginning of this video, pure means basically extreme version of transparency that we're talking about here. And in some ways that is true, and that is exactly what I experienced. It's transparent, then transparent. And that's kind of hard to explain. But another thing that I noticed is that when I plug in different amplifiers to try with the 4 lanes, change things in my system, whether it be, my streamer, my DAC, my preamplifier, my amplifier, whatever I change in my system, the 4 lanes really take advantage of that. Sometimes for the worse, sometimes for the better. So explaining a little bit further, you know how you have a speaker and sometimes you change your amplifier and you're like, I don't hear that much of a difference. And that's kind of the experience you get with other speakers. Sometimes the difference is small, sometimes the difference is huge, but with the 4 lanes, it's always huge. And another benefit to a single driver like this is that it's usually sensitive, and that's no exception with the 4 lanes. It's 94 dB in sensitivity, which means that you can drive with relatively low powered amplifiers like tube amplifiers, like again, the Dynaco ST70. And when I hook it up, I hear a lot of that Dynaco sound versus when I hook up something like the Orchard Audio Starkrimson Ultra Class D amplifier. Both sound good in their own ways, but when I switch, I immediately hear the difference, and the difference is quite drastic, especially in that tonality department. So the Dynaco ST70 gives off this vintage cafe vibe, right? So it feels like I'm in some kind of vintage cafe, you know, it almost feels like I'm in some kind of VHS film. I don't know. It's like, takes me back, right? Has a little bit of that fun character, the mid-range magic, the tube magic, the holographicness, right? And it's interesting. It's lovely. But when I go to the Starkrimson Ultra, well, now I get bass for days. I'm like really impressed with the bass of the 4 lanes even more than I was before. The mid-range is still beautiful, but it's not as beautiful as the ST70. It's kind of like more neutral, right? And it's a little bit more balanced. The high frequency is still sparkly, but it's not as airy as the ST70. So, you know, it's more overall balanced sound. So for a speaker to go from a fun sounding cafe vibe to a pretty neutral, pretty nice balanced sound, that is a huge 2 different sounds. And that's kind of what I found to be the pure sound, right? Not just audibly, oh yeah, this is very pure, but whenever I hook up a different amplifier, it really takes advantage of that. Whenever I change anything in my system for that matter, it takes advantage of that for better or worse. And as long as it's a good pairing, not the bad pairings, but as long as it's a good pairing, whether it be ST70 or the Starkrimson Ultra, both of them sound good and sound still transparent. And again, that transparent then transparent type of purity. And you know that analogy that audiophiles make with like how transparent the sound is? It's like looking through a clean glass. Well, this is kind of like removing the glass. There is no glass. It's so pure that there is no glass. You're just looking. There's no glass. You're just looking. And if all of that audiophile jargon about purity didn't really help you understand what I'm talking about in terms of sounding pure, I think the best way is to play a demo track that has a lot of vocals in it, right? Especially female vocals. Because when you hear vocals through the speaker, you really understand what I'm talking about. The lip smacks, all the little nuances really help with the illusion of the singer being in your room. It's really uncanny.
We'll just head down, carry on, 'cause what else can we do but get through? And we'll sing hallelujah, but what is that to you right now?
And it's really not just the vocals. When you hear string instruments, saxophone, or really any instrument or sound effects through the speaker, everything is placed very well. So again, that imagery is perfect and spot on to where you can almost draw out where the guitar player is, where the singer is. Like you can draw out the stage without even being there. And that is something, right? The imaging is so perfect that you can almost feel like you're in the space that the thing was recorded in. It is quite uncanny. So here's a track for you with strings. Now, if the demo went well and it was recorded quite well, then you should be able to hear the guitar. You can almost feel the body of the guitar. You can almost feel the scrape of the guitar. It is quite uncanny. I really like the aspect of that pure sound that people are talking about, which I really didn't get until I tried these speakers. Because even when I add a subwoofer with the 4 lanes, or the OGYs for that matter, I get more bass, but I don't lose that purity. I still get that kind of liveliness, that live feel, as if the performance is actually taking place. Not really the feeling of a pre-recorded music being played back. That's kind of the experience I get, is that live feel, and that is quite impressive. Now, I know that, some people probably already clicked away because I said that it rolls off earlier in the high frequency and the bass with wideband drivers like this. However, again, subjectively speaking, this is not a warm, rolled off, dark sounding speaker, despite the fact that, it rolls off earlier in the high frequency. So I don't know what to say, but anyone that really hears the speaker will tell you that this is not a warm, rolled off speaker. Yes, it has some meat and a little bit of that kind of juice in the mid-range, right? That liveliness, that excitement, but also that warmth and smoothness and spaciousness. And you kind of get that with the high frequency too, but you get a little bit of that sparkle, right? So if you have it paired up with the wrong amplifier, it can sound bright. If you play poor recordings or metal, metal tracks like heavy metal or, really rock, sibilant tracks, then yeah, this is not the speaker that you want to play with. It's just gonna simply sound too bright, too brittle. But if you have the right pairing amplifier that sounds good with the 4 lanes and doesn't make the high frequency more brighter than it is, and also if you play the right track, which the right track being everything else other than really metal or something that's really sibilantly recorded, then you really simply get magic. You simply get this beautiful sound out of these speakers with all the benefits I talked about for a single driver design, like the coherency, right? You're not gonna beat the coherency of a single driver. Again, that pure sound that we're trying to kind of, run home with in this video, that I'm trying to explain over and over again. And again, third, that flexibility in terms of you plug something in, you hear the difference immediately, which is fun, but also, very beneficial if you are trying to shape the sound in your listening room to, a specific sound. For me, I really love the Dynaco SC70, right? Like I said, because suddenly the speaker sounds like this cafe, vintage cafe vibe, and it's beautiful. And a lot of speakers don't change that way. A lot of speakers have their own character to where the amplifier can only do so much. It is not always the case where the amplifier takes full control of the speaker and the sound works together this beautifully to create this homogeneous sound. It's different. It is really a master at few things, right? Not all things. And talking about being master of few and not all, well, here's one thing that the 4 lanes is good at and one thing that the 4 lane is not so good at. And it may break or make your experience. 1, well, the 4 lanes are extremely good in sound staging, right? So usually when you toe out the speakers like I have done in my room, you're compromising imagery. But even if I have these speakers towed directly out towards the room like this, I get perfect phantom center, I get perfect imaging. I just have increased my soundstage with no compromise of imagery. This speaker is impressive in the depth of soundstage, yes, how deep it is, but the width is enormous. The width is crazy. And it's not just crazy wide, you get perfect imagery within that wide soundstage, which is something that you don't normally get with other speakers, because once you tow it out like this, then now you don't have that perfect imaging. You tow it in more, now you don't have a wide soundstage. So you have to kind of compromise and, play with how much you tow in the speakers. In this case, my advice is to tow it directly out towards the room if you like a large soundstage, because you won't be compromising on the imaging aspect, as the imaging is perfect no matter how I tow these speakers in or out. Now getting to the not so good part of this speaker, well, again, this speaker isn't perfect like any other speaker. It's a really master of few things, does really some things really well, but some things not so much. This speaker is really good at low volumes and even medium and reasonably high volumes. But when it comes to high volumes, right, I'm talking about like 80, 90 dB loud. So if you're someone that likes to play music loud, this speaker is not for you. Why? Well, it sounds really good at low to medium volumes. It's probably the best speaker I have heard at low volumes. It contains all that nuance and all that stuff, even if I don't crank up the music. However, when I crank up the music, what ends up happening is that the high frequency becomes a little bit too beaming. And that is, again, an inherent problem to a single driver like this, is that when you crank up to high volumes, you start to get beaming. So what is beaming? Well, beaming is essentially when you go to the high frequencies. As you get to the higher frequencies and at louder volumes, it starts to narrow in its kind of directivity. So now the high frequency is shooting at your ears like almost a laser beam, hence beaming. And for some people, that creates a not so good experience of that, kind of rigid, kind of brittle, bright sound that you find harsh. Now, in case of the 4-lane and the EMS drivers, it's using the wooden plug in the middle to combat some of the inherent problems of a single driver like beaming, but it's still not going to fix it perfectly. So you can play this loudspeaker louder than other single driver designs I have personally tried, I find, before it gets to that beaming point. However, you still can't rock out with these speakers, especially if you're doing critical listening, because at louder volumes, again, 80, 90 dB type of loud, it just doesn't sound good in the high frequency. It can be quite brittle at times with certain tracks, especially even with the right pairing of amplifiers. So you do have to watch out for that. So that's pretty much it from me. I hope this video was helpful, entertaining, and informative. And if it was, please click that like button. It does help my channel out greatly, and it doesn't cost you anything. And I'll see you guys on my next journey and my next audio talk on this channel. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next video, and I'll see you guys